3 nights ago, I dropped my husband off at the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, believing he was leaving for a 3-day business trip to Chicago. We had done this routine many times before: kiss goodbye, quick smile, suitcase rolling into the terminal. Nothing unusual, nothing that warned me I was standing inches away from the man who was planning to erase me and our 8-year-old son from this world. But the moment Marshall disappeared through the automatic doors, my son Caleb tugged my sleeve with shaking fingers. His voice barely rose above the airport noise when he whispered, "Mom, please do not go home tonight." He said it once. Firm, afraid, like a child who had finally run out of time. I wanted to laugh it off. I wanted to tell him everything was fine. Parenting books teach us that kids imagine things, that fear comes easy to young minds. But Caleb was not an anxious child. He was observant, still, quiet, the kind who noticed the details the world ignored. And in his eyes that night I saw a kind of terror no child should know. I stood there with my keys in hand, the parking lot lights reflecting off the windshield. Home was only 20 minutes away, our small tan house in Scottsdale. The one Marshall and I saved 7 years to build. My instinct said go home, be logical, be normal. But a different instinct whispered something else. Listen to him, listen to the fear quivering in his voice. Believe him even if you do not understand. So I turned the ignition without heading toward home. I drove away from everything familiar because my child asked me to. I did not know it then, but his plea was the single reason we are still alive to tell this story today. Before everything burned down, my life looked ordinary from the outside. My name is Evelyn Brooks. I was 38, a mother who packed lunch boxes with apple slices and peanut butter sandwiches, who taught 4th graders how to shade light into color, and who believed good marriages were built from patience and compromise. I was not perfect, but I tried, every day. Marshall and I met in college at Arizona State. He was the earnest engineering major, quiet and analytical. I was the art student who painted sunsets on scraps of canvas because the world felt softer in orange and gold. We married young, built routines around each other, and made decisions like normal people do. Sunday pancakes, grocery lists, saving for furniture, laughing at sitcom reruns when insomnia kept us awake. The hardest chapter of our marriage was the long road to Caleb. Years of fertility treatments left bruises on my stomach and moments of hope cracked open by disappointment. Still, we kept trying, telling ourselves love survives pressure. When Caleb finally arrived, small and blinking and real, we cried like children, because the fight had purpose. We promised to give him everything we never had. Our home in Scottsdale was modest but filled with pieces of us. Marshall designed the solar heating system himself. I painted the nursery glow in the dark constellations that Caleb memorized by 3. We planted a lemon tree the week we moved in, dreaming of lemonade summers and school projects and birthdays with too much frosting. Looking back now, I realized the foundation of our marriage was already shifting. Small cracks I ignored because love teaches you to justify what hurts. Long work trips, late-night messages he never explained, phone calls he took in the backyard where I could not hear. I convinced myself trust meant silence. I was wrong. Sometimes the things we ignore are the things that grow teeth in the dark. Sometimes the collapse begins long before the walls fall. The first warning came months before the fire. Caleb was sitting at the kitchen counter doing math homework when he said it as casually as asking for more milk. "Mom, Dad talks to a lady when you are asleep." I remember freezing with the dish towel in my hand, half expecting him to grin and say he was making up a story. But he looked serious, tracing multiplication problems with the blunt end of a pencil. I asked what he meant. Caleb answered the way observant children do, with detail adults often miss. He said Dad went outside to the porch late at night to talk on speakerphone. He mentioned a soft voice, a woman who laughed in the way people laugh when they are familiar. I told him maybe Dad was taking a work call with a colleague in another time zone. Caleb nodded, but his eyes were uneasy, like he sensed I was choosing comfort over truth. A week later, he noticed a black sedan parked across from our house 3 nights in a row. Tinted windows. No one getting in or out, just sitting, watching. I told him not to scare himself with stories. Neighborhoods have strangers, and not every stranger is a threat. Caleb stared at the window like something on the other side was waiting to be named. Another time, he stood in the doorway holding my phone, saying Dad was looking at this when he thought you were in the shower. He did not know the password, but he saw my name under missed calls that I never made. I brushed it off. I said privacy matters, even for parents, What I meant was I was afraid to ask questions I was not ready to hear answers to. Children notice what adults train themselves to overlook. They hear tension in a laugh, see distance in a glance, feel danger in silence. Caleb was trying to warn me long before the night he begged me not to drive home. I told myself he was young. I told myself marriage has secrets. I told myself everything was fine. Every lie I used to calm my heart became a thread that later helped unravel my life. After we left the airport, I drove without a destination. Phoenix skylines blurred through the windshield, and every red light felt like a decision. Home was only 20 minutes away, but Caleb sat in the back seat with his seatbelt locked tight across his chest, eyes wide as though he expected the night itself to open and swallow us. The more I watched him, the louder my instinct pressed against my ribs. He kept glancing at the rear window like someone might be following. I asked him what he meant earlier. "What do you know about Dad?" He hesitated, then whispered the sentence that changed the air inside the car. He said Dad told someone we would not make it to Monday. His voice cracked on the last word, like speaking it made the truth more real. Instead of driving home, I pulled into a gas station on the edge of Scottsdale. The neon lights buzzed overhead while I bought snacks we did not need, just to buy time. Caleb watched every car pulling in as if danger had wheels. When we stepped back outside, he grabbed my hand again. He said Dad told a woman something like it would all look like an accident, that we would finally stop being a problem. I drove to the next exit and then the next, passing neighborhoods that looked safe enough to trust. My hands did not stop shaking until Caleb fell asleep in the back seat. I parked across from our house under a streetlight that flickered every few seconds, casting the same scene in light, then shadow. Our curtains drawn. The porch empty. The lemon tree we planted when Caleb was born swaying gently like nothing was wrong. Hours passed in silence. Midnight crept toward morning, and I almost convinced myself to unlock the door and crawl into bed, like every other night, pretending safety was still ours. But at 11:14 p.m., a dark SUV rolled down our street with no headlights. It slowed, stopped directly in front of our house. Two figures stepped out, dressed in black from head to toe. No hesitation, no confusion. One of them reached into his pocket. He pulled out a key. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like falling through the floor of my own life. The front door opened with one smooth turn, like someone who belonged there, like someone who was invited. I exhaled so quietly it hurt. That was the moment I understood Caleb had been right all along. The two men disappeared inside our home like shadows slipping through a memory. No broken windows, no forced entry, just the quiet certainty of people who expected no one to stop them. I pressed Caleb's face gently against my shoulder so he would not see what came next, but he peeked through my hair anyway. His voice was a shake of breath when he whispered, "That is Dad's spare key." The night stayed still, but inside our house something changed. A faint glow flickered through the living room curtains. At first it looked like someone had turned on a lamp. Then the glow deepened into orange, too bright, too alive. Smoke curled from the edges of the windows like fingers testing the air. Flames licked up the floral drapes I sewed the summer Caleb learned to walk. The house did not burn slow. It bloomed into fire like gasoline had been waiting for a single spark. Our home became a furnace. Wooden beams crackled, the heat warping glass before it even shattered. The roof glowed like a sunrise no one asked for. All the while, the two men walked calmly back to their SUV, leaving the door wide open behind them. No rush, no panic. They drove away without turning on headlights, disappearing into the same darkness that delivered them. If Caleb and I had gone home like we planned, we would have been asleep in the master bedroom above the garage. The fire spread so fast that smoke would have filled our lungs in minutes. We would never have made it out. Every memory we owned was burning to the ground while we sat in the safety of shadows, hearts pounding in sync. Caleb cried quietly, and I held him because it was all I could do. I watched the house glow brighter until the walls collapsed inward. The life we built was turning into ash. And still, a single question burned sharper than the fire itself. Who gave them permission to walk into our home? Once the flames swallowed what we once called home, I drove away with Caleb curled against the passenger door, too exhausted to cry anymore. I kept to side roads instead of highways, every headlight behind us making me tighten my grip on the wheel. I was not ready to call the police. Evidence mattered, and all I had was fear and smoke in my lungs. If I accused Marshall without proof, he could twist it into hysteria. Men like him know how to look calm while the world burns at their feet. But I remembered one detail. Marshall said he drove himself to the airport the night before his flight. His Honda should still be parked there. That thought became a rope I held onto in the dark. I turned the car around and headed to Sky Harbor, praying I was wrong but deeply knowing I was not. The parking structure was near silent at 2 in the morning. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as I walked row by row, my phone shaking in my hand. On the third level, against a concrete pillar, I found his silver Honda Curve. I stood there breathing shallowly, watching my reflection tremble in the window before I unlocked the door with the spare key. I never returned to him. The scent hit first, not Marshall's cologne, something chemical, sharp, a smell too similar to what drifted off our house when it burned. I searched slowly, methodically, the way grief sharpens into purpose. In the glove compartment, nothing but maps and gum wrappers. Under the seat, dust and old receipts. Then my hand brushed something cold taped beneath the passenger seat. A burner phone. No case, no personalization. Just a cheap device that hummed with secrets. The battery still held 14%, just enough to open a message thread labeled only with the initial A. I tapped it. And the words felt like knives. 3 nights earlier, we cannot wait much longer. The fire will look like a wiring fault. They will not survive the smoke. Then another message from Marshall himself. Evelyn will fall asleep early. Caleb too. Clean, quick, no loose ends. My vision blurred, but I kept reading. Insurance papers photographed. 48,000 withdrawal receipts. A picture of our house plans, with red pen circles marking structural stress points where fire would spread fastest. Notes written in Marshall's handwriting, words I will never unsee. Make it look accidental. Gas line rupture. Blame electrical heating. EC both inside. E and C, Evelyn and Caleb. My son and I were initials on a blueprint of death. I left the parking garage with the burner phone tucked deep inside my coat, as though hiding it could somehow slow the truth. Caleb slept against the window, unaware his father had written our initials like targets on a planned sheet. The city felt unfamiliar as I drove toward the only person I believed could help. Not the police, not friends, someone who understood betrayal with more clarity than emotion. Her name was Marianne Doyle, a family attorney who once helped settle my father's estate years earlier. She had a reputation for digging through lies like an archaeologist of human behavior. Her office lights were off when I arrived at nearly 3 in the morning, but I knocked anyway, letting desperation carry through my fist. It took a moment, and then she appeared through the glass door in slippers and a wool sweater, eyes sharpened by instinct rather than sleep. I showed her everything, the messages, the photos, the notes linking Marshall to the fire. Marianne studied each piece without flinching. When she finished, she leaned back and crossed her arms like someone assembling a complicated puzzle. She told me to breathe, and then she said something I did not expect. The evidence is strong, Evelyn, but not enough for conviction. A defense can claim texts were staged or the phone was planted. We need something that cannot be argued. We need his voice. My stomach tightened. She wanted a confession. Marianne explained the plan with patient, careful words, like guiding someone through a dark room. I would contact Marshall pretending to be an investigator from the insurance company, claim there were questions about the fire, tell him we needed to meet in person. People with secrets hate uncertainty and rush to regain control. She chose the location for the confrontation herself, a cafe in downtown Phoenix called Morning and Oak, busy enough to feel neutral, loud enough for conversation, but quiet enough for a hidden recording device to catch every syllable. I looked at my hands and realized they were steady for the first time all night. Fear had burned away, replaced by something colder, clearer, a resolve built from ash. I was no longer running from the truth. I was walking toward it. Saturday morning arrived pale and quiet, as if the world were holding its breath. Marianne met me outside the cafe at 9:15, handed me a small recording device no bigger than a thumbnail, and reminded me to keep my voice steady. Confessions collapse under accusation, she said. Ask questions, let him fill the silence. At 9:52, I took a seat near the window. Sunlight spilled across the table, warming my hands but not my heart. Every sound felt magnified: the hiss of the espresso machine, the clatter of cups, the breeze nudging the corner of the menu. I kept my breathing slow, like someone preparing to walk through fire a second time. 10:07. The bell above the cafe door chimed. Marshall stepped inside wearing the same navy coat he left home in 3 nights earlier. His hair was combed, his expression carefully controlled, but when he saw me sitting there, alive, unburned, unburied, the mask cracked. His eyes widened first, then his mouth fell open in a soundless question. "Evelyn," he whispered, as though saying my name might reverse reality. I did not smile. I gestured to the chair across from me, and he sat like a man descending a staircase he could not see the end of. For a moment we only looked at each other, the woman he tried to erase and the man who nearly succeeded. I asked where he had been the past 2 days. He lied easily. Work extensions, flight delays, miscommunication. Each word floated like ash, weightless and empty. So I placed my phone on the table between us and spoke gently. "There was a fire at our house. Investigators say the structure failed too fast to be accidental." I watched his throat tighten as he swallowed. He asked if Caleb and I were all right, and the question trembled like bad acting. Then I asked the first real question. "Why was there a burner phone in your car, Marshall?" His breath faltered. Silence filled the table like smoke filling a room. I leaned slightly forward and asked the second question, softer than the first. "Who is Alyssa?" He broke before I finished the name. His jaw clenched. His hands curled. Fear flickered through his eyes, followed by a flash of anger that I was alive when he had planned otherwise. He whispered the truth without meaning to. "I did not plan for you to be here." The moment the words left his mouth, the recorder captured them. Clear, sharp, inescapable. Marshall was arrested that afternoon. The recording device had done exactly what Marianne predicted, caught his own voice confirming intent, suspicion, motive. He never said the word kill. Men like him rarely do. But when he whispered, "I did not plan for you to be here," the meaning was unmistakable. I was not meant to survive. Neither was Caleb. The weeks that followed felt unreal, like living underwater. Investigators confirmed accelerants inside the remains of the house. The wiring had been tampered with. Marshall's bank activity showed large withdrawals leading up to the fire, almost matching the amount noted in the burner phone conversations. Alyssa was found 2 towns away, hiding in a rental apartment filled with luxury bags still tagged. When confronted, she traded information for a reduced sentence. Her testimony, paired with the audio recording, formed a narrative no lawyer could reshape. Trial lasted 23 days. I sat every morning in the front row, Caleb's small hand wrapped around mine, sometimes trembling, sometimes steady. Marshall avoided my eyes most of the time, but occasionally he looked at me like I was a ghost he couldn't shake. On the morning of final arguments, I caught him staring at Caleb instead, and in that moment I realized he did not see his son. He saw risk, evidence, the one witness he never planned for. The jury returned a verdict of guilty on all primary charges: attempted murder by arson, conspiracy to commit insurance fraud, endangerment of a minor, 28 years. No possibility of early release without board review. Alyssa accepted 12 with cooperation credit. Neither sentence brought comfort. Survival does not erase trauma, it simply proves you endured it. Caleb and I moved to Flagstaff 3 months later. A smaller home, 1 story. Windows facing morning light, not shadows. The first night, Caleb asked if the doors were locked 3 separate times before sleep finally found him. The second night only twice. Healing is slow, but forward. I tell this story not to reopen wounds, but to leave markers for anyone walking roads that look like mine once did. Betrayal rarely arrives as thunder. It begins as small cracks. Phone calls taken outside. Eyes that look past you instead of toward you. A child whispering something you dismiss because reality is harder to face than doubt. I loved a man I thought I understood. I trusted him because marriage teaches loyalty long before it teaches caution. But trust without awareness is not love, it is surrender. Today Caleb laughs more than he cries. He plays soccer in the park near our new home. He checks locks only once before bed. His drawings hang on the fridge beside mine, bright colors where ash once tried to live. We survived, not intact, not unchanged, but alive, rebuilding with hands that have known loss and still choose to create. Pain did not get the final word. If I could leave one lesson with you, it is this: listen before you lose. Listen when something feels wrong and you cannot explain why. Listen when a child speaks, because children do not invent danger, they notice it first. And most of all, listen to your own instinct. It will try to protect you even when love tells you to look away. Thank you for hearing my truth. If my story reaches even one person standing at the edge of a decision they are afraid to make, then surviving had purpose. If it reached you, I ask gently share it. Comment how you felt, where you are listening from. Support helps these stories find the next person who needs them. You are not alone, you are not powerless. Pay attention to the quiet warnings. Sometimes they are the difference between a life that burns down and a life rebuilt from